Good day to our listeners joining us at RapidLeaks. My name is Dev Tyagi and I welcome you to a brand new edition of The 12th Man, a special cricket edition where we talk about the nuances of the game and the newsmakers and the trendsetters in the great gentleman's game known as cricket. Now, today we have a very special episode where we are discussing about what went wrong and what exactly didn't work out for two-time world champions of the T20 World Cup, the West Indies. That's right, the Caribbean cricket team. Joining me today is revered cricket commentator, fitness enthusiast, coach, cricket manager, broadcaster, seasoned radio expert, talker, communicator, and all things West Indies, Mr. Vernon Springer. Good day to you, sir. I hope the weather is good wherever you are. I hope you are refreshed and ready to go on this smashing episode. And so keen to talk to you here at Rapid Leaks. How are you?
Hey, great, and it's wonderful to be speaking to you. Let me wish you a happy belated Diwali day in terms of what's going on, and it's been a proud moment for all Indians all around the world that you would recognize that Britain now has a prime minister, and I think this is welcoming news. So, although things maybe have not gone well on the cricket field for Cricket West Indies, it's in the time that we live that we have to be able to, expect that. And I say this to you, Dev, because you're passionate about West Indies cricket. But I think what we have to sit down and really reflect on is that we have to start looking at ourselves in the mirror to find out what has been going on. So expectations have been so high 40 years ago that we feel that that is supposed to still continue. But we have to be able to start looking at ourselves in the mirror and find out where we have gone wrong and where we need to go to be able to fix the problem. It's not going to be an easy fix, but it has to be over a 10-year cycle with us looking into the mirror in terms of what's going to be happening. So what we've been hearing, Dev, over the last couple of days is almost like a blame game, and a blame game to the point where everybody is shooting fingers all over the place. This problem just didn't start yesterday. This problem would have started way back, Dev, at an appointing time, and if we follow by our history, when England closed the door on West Indian cricketers while we were dominating the world scene. They saw us as a threat. And in seeing us as a threat, there was a movement to introduce a number of rules in the game of cricket, which first started with the bouncer rule. Secondly, it also started where at one point in time, during a 10-year cycle when we were on top, we had over 50 West Indian cricketers who were playing in English county cricket. Once that door closed, our administrators never got a grasp as to how to be able to harness the talent pool once England had closed the door on us. You would also follow to Dev, and I'm just giving you a historical perspective. You would also follow that.
Before we jump to that, could I just quickly bring our readers up to speed with what exactly happened in this tournament before we diagnose the problem, which you have avid answers to, I'm sure. So, two-time world champions knocked out in the first round, perhaps the lowest ever that the West Indies cricket team has ever plunged to. The first game, they lost to Scotland by a pitiable margin of 42 runs. Pitiable from a West Indies perspective, that how shallow could things get. And the final game, which was like a nail in the coffin, they lost by 9 wickets. And guess what? Ireland had 2.5 overs to spare. But before we diagnose the problem further, I had a list of questions to Mr. Springer for our listeners who are tuning in today at Rapid Leaks. And I have three major questions. But the first question is, are things going to change now that Phil Simmons has agreed to step down, or rather he's been instructed to go away?
This is not a quick term fix, Dev. So don't expect your expectation that if a new coach comes in tomorrow, that West Indies is suddenly going to bounce back up. Like I said to you in my opening statements, this is a 10-year cycle. This is a 10-year cycle. And the 10-year cycle has to come where whoever takes over the role as Cricket West Indies president for the next cycle, because elections is due next year. Whoever is going to be the coach, it is not an easy fix. It's a fundamentally problem that needs to be ironed out over a period of time. And like I said to you in my opening statements, the time that we live in, we have to adjust. So we can't expect miracles. And so everything is going to take an entire new process, because you might become coach of the West Indies team there. What sort of brand are you going to bring to West Indies cricket? That is one of the issues which we certainly have to identify. For the last 10 years, right, we have been trying to play a brand that we have not been able to match up against. And we have not been adaptable to say, hey, let's change that and try something else different.
Right. Right. Are there any names which have come to the fray? Who after Mr. Phil Simmons? Who's the right person? If you were to select, who would, for instance, Mr. Vernon Springer appoint as the next coach of this cricket team?
It depends on what the organization wants, because you would recognize that Phil Simmons was fired in 2015. And if we check when Phil Simmons was fired in 2015, what happened? He came back under a new president in Ricky Skerritt, whose board brought back Phil Simmons after he was fired in 2015. Now let's look at the history between that period of time when Phil Simmons was fired and when he was brought back. The current board of Richard Pybus and company and Vasper Drakes, they were fired by the Ricky Skerritt administration, right? So you got firings going left, right, and center.
True.
It is very, for me, I am not the administrator. I'm only an armchair critic looking in and can offer my advice. I don't know what the new board will be thinking about, whether they want to go to a foreign coach or whether they want to go to a local-based coach. What I would say to you, Dev, is that we really need to be able to make sure that we find the best possible candidates. I also feel that Desmond Haynes should be in conversation. His name should be considered. But whether or not is Desmond Haynes willing at this juncture to sign a contract for 4 years to be able to maybe take West Indies cricket to a different level, those are conversations that need to be taking place. But as I speak to you, and because you've asked me straight away, I would go for a Desmond Haynes straight away, right? And if he does not want to be the head coach of the team, he certainly has to be the batting coach of whatever system going forward to be able to help West Indies cricket.
Right. Now, another question which has been looming in my mind, and I'm sure that's also the case with so many other diehard fans. And I know as a journalist, one needs to have a certain sense of objectivity and unbiasedness. But when it comes to West Indies, I'm slightly biased because I've grew up admiring Mr. Brian Lara. So there's an obvious inclination to this cricket team. There's so much of talent even in this team which lost so badly and spinelessly. Puran is an amazing batsman when he gets going. Kyle Mayers, we are aware of his talent. We know about his unbeaten double century. Brandon King was showing some class, and Alzari Joseph was hitting the deck really hard, and Jason Holder was amongst the wickets. Odin Smith was pounding those big sixes. What really went wrong? As a close and keen observer of this cricket team and somebody who calls a spade, what does Mr. Springer make of this heartbreaking performance in Australia?
Well, first of all, I don't think that the present West Indies Cricket Board did any justice to Nicholas Pooran. Nicholas Pooran is not a captain. He was almost entrusted with the captaincy.
That's true.
We sometimes have to understand how we can destroy players. Shimon Hetmeyer won us an under-19 World Cup. So he's supposed to be in the as captain. We're short of leadership in the Caribbean. And we have not addressed that seriously. When you look at our regional captains, even at the A team level, they move from the franchise level and go to the A team level, we've been juggling. And so we have consistently not worked on our leadership captains. We have not groomed our captains. So I'm saying to you, Shimon Hetmeyer, who won us a World Cup final, has
Right.
never been in the conversation. Our franchises have also failed West Indies cricket because I will give you a present situation. Leon Johnson is touted to be the quote unquote one of the best regional captains, but can't command a spot in a West Indies senior team simply because he just doesn't have the pedigree consistently
Numbers
to
also.
earn a spot in the West Indies team, right?
Right.
So already that is a problem. For the 2022 CG United Insurance Super 50 that is coming up, Shimon Hetmeyer was the captain of the Guyana Amazon Warriors in CPL, but he now has to play under Leon Johnson because of the politics in Guyana, who have not been willing and willing and ready to say, well, hey, now is the time for us to be able to look at Shimon Hetmeyer and make him a viable candidate because he would have won a World Cup for us at the under 19 level. It's time to move him up and continue in that pathway. So I'll give you one scenario. Let's look at another situation. After a poor, dismal performance for Nicholas Puran, Trinidad and
Right.
Tobago Red Force has appointed Nicholas Puran as a captain for the Super 50 team. What confidence you think he can bring to the Trinidad and Tobago dressing room after his deflated performance as West Indies captain? So instead of you allow him to come back to the Caribbean and just concentrate as a player, you are rewarding mediocrity by saying to him, go ahead and captain Trinidad and Tobago team. So you understand the two problems that I'm talking about. So
Yeah.
on one hand, for me, if I was Puran, I would step down as West Indies white ball captain and
I
say to the
agree.
selectors, I just want to go concentrate and play my cricket.
Right.
I am not saying that he can't come back to be West Indies white ball captain, but at this juncture,
Right.
he needs help that will be able to help him to be a captain going forward.
Right. So you say that there is a genuine dearth of leadership, and that's actually hitting the nail hard because that's truly the problem here that needs to be addressed. Uh, it's just a thought in my mind. It's not a fanboy theory that should we get Jason Holder back as the captain? Why did we let go of him? Because he was doing fine as a white ball captain. Might not have had astounding numbers in terms of wins and all that, but isn't he the right guy to go back to?
Well, there's stakeholders who will feel, do we need Jason Holder as our white ball captain? We have Craig Brathwaite, who is our test captain. Do we need to split roles of captains? Another name which I felt has been treated harshly by West Indies cricket is Carlos Brathwaite. When Carlos Brathwaite was removed as West Indies white ball captain, T20 captain, it was an appointing time in 2019 when we almost destroyed Carlos Brathwaite and we empowered Jason Holder. We wanted Jason Holder to be in control of everything. Now, Carlos Brathwaite was our white ball captain. He was removed. Jason Holder stepped up. He lost the series after winning as test captain and ODI captain. But the T20 captaincy, he didn't have that. And so we just destroyed Carlos Brathwaite during that period of time rather than build with him. So what seems to happen, and I'm saying that's why I'm saying to you, we have to start to look ourselves in the mirror. Who are the options that are available to us? You've just called one, Jason Holder. Is Jason Holder at this point in time for the next 2-3 years could be a good leader as our white ball captain with a Shimon Hetmeyer understudying him? That's one suggestion. We already know that Craig Brathwaite is our test captain. But where do we go from there after Craig Brathwaite? Do we go back to Jason Holder or do we go to Shimon Hetmeyer when Craig Brathwaite decide that I'm maybe no longer involved in test cricket? All these are questions that we need to start to look at ourselves in the mirror and figure out what we want to do.
Right. Did the West Indies brand of play surprise you? Did it take you by surprise? By which I mean the sudden and the shocking exit, which actually had so many fans, not just in the Caribbean but around the world, disappointed? Did it take you by any sense of surprise?
I don't think the West Indian players adapted to the match situations. And you have to adapt to a situation. You can't leave the Caribbean with one plan and decide that, oh yeah, we're a six-sitting team. We saw what happened to the last World Cup team was led by Kyron Pollard. Kyron Pollard and Phil Simmons picked that team. That's the team that they wanted to go to the World Cup. They wanted experience and they weren't worrying anything about youth. They wanted experience and they felt that they could have won the World Cup. The trick
Right.
that they missed is that the last team that won in 2016, this was now an older team. And because they were older team, a lot of the other teams had prepared where they had younger legs. Yes, the Gales and the Pollard and the Bravos and so would have been around the world, but the World Cup had become fast-paced. It had
That's
and we were left behind, and we never adapted to our situation. And that to me is what caused the Old Testament. We have not been adaptable to situations. We think that it's T20, but it's T20, yes, but it is cricket, which means that the fundamentals of the game must be applied. If you play in a T20 game, you're batting. That's 120 balls. It doesn't
right.
mean you have to have a plan in terms of how you're going about to execute what you want to execute.
Right.
So the objective, if you look at most of the teams around the world, is
Right.
that somebody who starts, they normally bat as deep as possible down into the innings. If you look at the last T20 10 innings of the West Indies team, how many of their batters have batted deep in the innings and have got a century and a big century that sends
Hard,
a statement?
hardly. Even this time around, I think one of the biggest naders of the West Indies team was the strange accumulation of dot balls. I call it strange because it's like one of the basic T20 hygienes to follow. That don't give too many easy runs, don't bowl too many extras, do not accumulate a mountain of dot balls. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, in the final game which they lost, I think there were anything more than 24 and more dot balls. So I think uh, the other big problem being the inability to play spin. When you have this dot ball problem in conjunction, you really are staring at a behemoth of a problem which ultimately becomes very indigestible, and I think that consumed them in the end. What do you think about this
And,
this issue?
well, it's more than just the dot ball percentage. I think that we missed a trick in taking Andrew Fletcher to the World Cup. The last time Andrew Fletcher went to the World Cup, he didn't play a game. He's in the form of his life. Evan
Plus,
Lewis
he crashed league pretty
did
well in Australia. He knows these pitches. He knows these
right.
grounds.
Evan Lewis, you could tell does not want to be around West Indies cricket. He looks like a man who's got a burden on his shoulder. He doesn't look relaxed. He was not comfortable during the CPL. And I thought we did some injustice to not take Andrew Fletcher to the World Cup. More so, we took Johnson Charles based on his performance in CPL and then turned him into a keeper. My thought would have been, if you're taking Johnson Charles, you have to take Andrew Fletcher, because Evan Lewis certainly was struggling. He was out of it. And the contribution and the commitment that he would have got from Andrew Fletcher, I don't think we got that commitment from Evan Lewis. And if we look at Evan Lewis' performances over the last 2 years, there's been really not much to shout about. He's struggled to get into an IPL team. And even some of the leagues that he's played around the world, he's really not dominated in that aspect. Coming back to talk about the middle, getting a singles, the art of batsmanship is missing from West Indian batters because they're looking for power rather than looking to find the gaps. And that is one of the problems which I feel that our coaching panel, if you look around at our coaching panel, they have failed the West Indian batters in that aspect. We're not finding the gaps enough. And the intensity in our running causes us to operate the way how we've been operating. We ball out to the deep and we get one run. While when the teams come to bat, they run the West Indian fielders ragged all around because they're looking for runs all the time. West Indians hit the ball down to long on and they jog. The other teams who come in and the Indians and the Pakistanis playing and the New Zealand and Australia playing against us, they hit the ball down to long on, they're thinking about too. Because they're looking at the distance to realize that hit the ball down to long on, that's maybe about 75 meters. If they run the first run hard and you get to the ball and you throw the ball, they're already back for 2 runs. West Indians, we're comfortable with 1. So the mindset and the attitude is what is really more or less killing us. And the art of batsmanship for our batters is what is plaguing us.
Right. I have this very dear friend of mine who thinks so passionately about West Indies as I do, perhaps. His name is Prashant, and he's a huge admirer of Mr. Brian Charles Dara. He and I were discussing something. Did the West Indians miss a trick somewhere in the past decade or half a decade, sir, by not getting the likes of Chandrapal, Saban, and Brian Lara himself to coach the national team or at least be associated with the team? Why I'm asking this is because somebody like Sunrisers Hyderabad, a leading IPL franchise, has gotten Brian Lara as their main coach now for the next edition, and I think for the other editions as well. But why didn't the West Indians count on Lara? Was there a lack of interest from the Prince of Trinidad side, or was there some other politics? Because there's so much of politics which any which ways dominates cricket in your region.
Let me say to you, politics is all over in sports. There's politics in India. You just had a new president being appointed, Sourav Ganguly. The politics was so strong that, sometimes you look and you see that Virat Kohli, although he had an excellent record as captain for Indian team, was forced out of the captaincy because of the political move in India. You look around in Australia, you see that there's politics. You look around in Pakistan. So politics will always be around sport. One of the things which I feel that has happened to us as I observe over the years is that in the Caribbean, we don't celebrate our legends. So it has taken the outer world to celebrate our legends. It took Alan Stanford to come to the Caribbean and recognize our great players and reward them. And not only reward them, but gave them value for what they were worth on the world stage. A lot of people sometimes don't want to hear that, but Alan Stanford is who started to recognize the late Everton Weeks, Sir Garfield Sobers, Sir Clive Lloyd, you name it. He brought them to prominence.
Right.
Let's look at our legends. How many of our legends serve on our national boards, even as advisors, or even as people who are in a consultation mood? Let's look at Clive Lloyd, Guyana's most successful sportsman. He was a sports minister, he was a sports administrator, he was a West Indies captain, he was a Guyana captain, you name it. The history books will tell you about Sir Clive Lloyd. But you have a stadium in Guyana, and there's no name of Clive Lloyd on that stadium.
That's
you have
true.
a gentleman like Steve Bucknor, one of the world's renowned umpires. There's no name of Steve Bucknor at Sabina Park in Jamaica. You have a gentleman by the name of Andrew Weeks from the Leeward Islands, from St. Kitts and Nevis, who was the first umpire from the Leeward Islands to have umpired Test cricket. There's no name of him in the Warner Park Stadium. You have Elcomida Willett from Nevis, who became the first player from the Leeward Islands to have played Test cricket 49 years ago. On your main stadium at Warner Park in St. Kitts, his name is nowhere mentioned on any of the stands or even anywhere around. But in Antigua, all of the legends, from Sir Andy Roberts to Sir Vivian Richards, national hero, to Sir Curtly Ambrose, to Sir Richie Richardson, who ended up becoming a doctorate the other day, Dr. Sir Richie Richardson, from those guys down are recognized. When you look around, Sir Wes Hall just got a statue of him in Barbados. So Barbados continues to recognize their natural heroes. But the rest of the Caribbean is soul searching. Brian Lara, yes, he's got an academy named after him. But we're not just talking about just naming names. We're talking about placing these individuals in key positions that can help your own growth. Shivner and Shandapal had to go to the US to be
Right.
recognized,
Right.
right? Brian Lara, you kind of now and again talking to Brian Lara. Brian Lara's knowledge of cricket, he doesn't need a piece of paper to be a coach. What he brings is more than a qualified coach who goes into a classroom and sits down and passes an exam. Desmond Haynes
That's what I'm
is
saying.
one of the
My,
finest.
my heart just goes out to this scenario. And of course, I love my country, India. I'm born here. My allegiance is to India. I'm more than happy that Sunrisers Hyderabad will have an excellent guru in Lara. But all that knowledge, which Lara is gonna pass on in exchange of a mighty buck or two, could have been so well utilized by his own countrymen. There is Puran out there. There's Alzari Joseph out there. Okay, there's Mayers. There's Shea Hope. Shea Hope's role model is Brian Lara. But who's Brian Lara spending time with? Probably a quarter of a year he's going to be in India instead of serving the country which actually gave him a chance to become the legend he is. And time and again he said, I want to, I've always been a humble servant of West Indies cricket. And yet here we are, we don't even have a coach who can instill the basic virtues, the basic values of winning. And sometimes I feel, sir, and I say this in all humility and simplicity, sometimes that killer instinct is lacking in the West Indies. It just seems that there's no sense of urgency. They really don't like to create pressure on the opposition. I mean, to lose to Scotland was a shocker, but they lost to Ireland, and Ireland defeated us, I mean, West Indians, 2-1 in the ODIs earlier under Pollard's captaincy in 2022.
Well, my buddy, we could have back Dev. I see an article came out on Cricket Info by Kieran Pollard who says that the decline of West Indies cricket started in 2016. He might have a case. And like I said to you in my opening statements, all of us will be blaming game and saying this and saying that. We need to, as administrators of the game in the Caribbean, look at ourselves in the mirrors. And I want to offer a way forward, a 10-year way forward, a 15-year forward that can be able to help West Indies cricket. And I don't want to conclude this interview without sharing my thoughts so that you understand how deep I think about West Indies cricket.
Yeah, please.
Administrators need to ask themselves, what is the best system for providing excellent West Indian cricketers? And you just alluded to that. How do we use our past players? How do we use Sir Andy Roberts? How do we use a Victor Eddy? How do we use a Evie Richardson? How do we use a Fitzroy Buffon? How do we use a Lawrence Rowe? How do we use some of our past players? How do we supply in a mentorship role to help young cricketers? How do we get a Dave Joseph to be able to, was one of the finest captains, to step out there and have a conversation as to the art of captaincy? How do we get all of our best captains in one room and begin to groom our young cricketers throughout the entire region? Those are conversations that we need to be happening. There needs to be, Dev, a revolution in West Indies cricket. And it maybe had to take us for this time to go to our lowest ebb, where our administrators wake up and look and say, hey, what are we doing? Let's look at ourselves in the mirror. Because what is happening at the franchise level, Dev, is a reflection as to what is happening at the senior level of the West Indies level. Because the same directors are the same ones who run the franchise and still run West Indies cricket. So what is different, Dev? What do you expect if at the franchise level we're doing the same thing? Are we putting systems in place, Dev, to help our young cricketers?
I doubt.
Let's look at the women game. Let's look at the women game, Dev. The women won in 2016, but we have regressed in the Caribbean because we didn't spend enough time, we didn't spend enough resources on developing the game throughout the entire Caribbean. What we did was just concentrated on a core group of players. So our pool is so shallow, it is so small, there's so much work need to be done. We have to upskill our coaches in the Caribbean, especially in the OECS, so that the demands of what is happening around world cricket, our coaches, our administrators, Dev, Cricket West Indies is a billion-dollar company. Let me repeat, Dev. Cricket
Yeah.
West Indies is a billion-dollar company. It is a
You and I,
brand.
of a year back, you said that they are not realizing the opportunity they are letting go of. Am I right?
You see how West Indies not being in the World Cup. You have comments coming from former players, from coaches who feel away that West Indies is not in the World Cup because we are
Right.
still a drawing card. People love to see West Indies. We are brand. Do we understand that in the Caribbean, Dev? That we are $1 billion industry? Our administrators certainly don't understand that. And that is why we are in the dilemma that we are. And so that's why I'm saying to you, Dev, West Indies cricket is a project and the problem solving exercise to be defined by measurable aims. We need aims, Dev. How do we move our cricket forward in the next 10 years? I
We
want to
might
suggest, Dev,
have to go a
I,
bit quick on. We have last
I,
five
want,
minutes.
I want to
Just
suggest
sure.
that the Caribbean cricket needs a coaching project from the age of 15 to 25. This would involve strength and empowering strength and conditioning coaches, bowling coaches, fast bowlers, spin bowling. That's the role of the coaches in that aspect. Oh, West
Right.
Indian feelers, Dev, we can't feel anymore. Just look at even the present team. We have to go back to our own awareness of our feeling, right? So we need to be able to put systems in place that would benefit us in a very big way. And let me just get a minute here, Dev.
Sure.
There are
We just have
benefits,
4 minutes remaining, so if we can
no
just
problem. There are benefits and a curse for high performance camps, players' welfare, potential solutions. We can all come together as one region. How we play less cricket in one-day cricket? What is our schedule? What is our brand of cricket? What is our brand, Dev? What is our brand? And finally, Dev, the board is divided. West Indies cricket is divided. And
it needs.
because we are divided, that is why we see the division on the team. We see the insularity that is still plaguing us. And our administrators, they feel they know it all. If you're an administrator, your job is to go there and seek funding to help the game. We need to have more dialogue taking place. You don't need to like me, Dev, but the interest must be to find the people who are passionate about West Indies cricket. The
That's
pressure
true.
of expectations, Dev, the administrators have failed West Indies cricket. No matter, look at our position. We can't even find a sponsor for our senior team, and we are brand because the expectations, we're still living off our past expectations of the Lloyd and the Sobers and the Lara 40, 35 years ago, and not understanding the time that we live in. So I'm saying there needs to be a revolution, Dev. The revolution needs to take place now, where all of us need to come down off our high horses and realize that we have a problem in the Caribbean, and that
Right.
all of us need to band together in order for us to shine over the next 10 years. It means that some of our legends, we need to have mentorship camps. We need to use some of our modern day players to have camps that are moving around, both in male and female, around the Caribbean. The government will support us, but the government can't continue to support us without a plan. And no amount of money that we have, Dev, if we don't change our mindset and our thinking, Dev, we will not be able to move West Indies cricket until when we stamp out the insularity and until when we understand that independently, we have to find people who are going to look at us differently. And we got to understand that if I bring in Dev and I bring in somebody from XYZ to look at the board and say, hey, this is what you guys have been doing for the last 10, 20 years. It's not working. Time enough for you now to try something for the next 10 years and to be honest with ourselves and figure out how do we change the franchise system. Right now we have contracted 15 players. We need to contract more than 15 players, Dev. We need second team cricket being played in the Caribbean. Why are we having under 15 cricket in the
I
Caribbean? Why
I
don't
think
we
the
have a primary school?
problem.
Why don't we have a primary school competition taking place, Dev? throughout the
I think that
Caribbean, male
I
and
think that
female.
the
Go ahead.
problems that we have in the Caribbean are far more than what can be encapsulated in one episode. Let us continue this talk. I think, in an essence, what you suggest as the right way forward, sir. Correct me if I'm wrong. Is that we need this is the now is the time for inner engineering of West Indies cricket. Some drastic steps concertedly have to be taken in order to drive the cricket forward instead of it falling backwards. And on that note, let us continue this discussion and meet again towards the conclusion of this edition's World Cup, by which time I'm sure some steps or some measures might have been taken by the authorities back in the Caribbean. And I'm glad that, I hate to say this, but I'm glad that Mr. Simmons stepping down is perhaps one of the right decisions because he was taking the team nowhere. Thank you for joining me today, sir. Thank you for our viewers who've listened in. And Mr. Springer, you are loved and respected by Rapid Leaks. We are going to be in touch again because you had some massive points and they need further expansion, which is going to happen in that next conclusion of this talk. So join us again on another special episode of The 12th Man. I'm your host and cricket journalist, Dev Tyagi, and that's cricket expert in the Caribbean, my lovely friend, Mr. Vernon Springer, who will join me again soon. Thank you.
God bless you. Thank you very much, Jeff.